Kalgara is an OP8 cope leader alongside all-time greats like Carrot, Marco, and King. Kalgara, for his effect, lets us play a Shandian warrior type card from hand with cost equal to our Dawn when attacking, and then take a life from our hand. This enables aggro board flooding and synergy with 5 sets worth of Sky Island bulk commons. What this means is Kalgara excels at very specifically his 5 to 6 Dawn curve and having amazing alt arts. He's able to drop 2 gigantic bodies faster at mid-game than any other deck in the game. You can drop a Katakuri blocker and a Wiper on 5 Dawn for a Searcher and a defensive blocker. You can drop a Kalgara and a Noland on 6 Dawn for a massive value push, or you can drop a Wiper and Ohm for a massive flood of board spam. While there are of course nuances to each of these options, typically any of these plays is enough to blow out an opponent and push for game. Even Rob Lucci can struggle to remove these units, and a deck like Blackbeard will often just lose outright. Of course, this means your early game and late game are going to be weaker. Early on, you're just trying to play enough Searchers to guarantee something later on, and late game, you're just trying to attack with enough Dawn to leave opponents where you want them until you can start chain dropping the all-powerful 10-drop Enel. Really, Enel is a true win condition 10-drop card. A heal, a large body, and a lingering threat that necessitates being dealt with. If an opponent is low enough on life, 10-drop Enel will just push for game while preventing you from being punished, taking all of your life. It even hits over a Gum Gum Giant and a 2k. The downside is that by being a 10-drop, you can't run any of the 1-cost defensive events that Kalgara traditionally loves. The Earth Won't Lose and El Thor become bricks late game, warping a deck built around Enel into needing more 2k counters and definitely the 0-cost event. And that's where my build comes in. We're focused on ensuring the peak 5 to 6 Dawn curve as often as possible, while still maintaining enough survivability to reach late game. A big part of this deck is getting to search every Sky Island card in the game, thanks to Upper Yard and Shura. This means getting to run niche techs that would not work in other decks. Ohm, for example, lets us check 5 for a Holly then play 1 from our hand. In most decks, this would be too inconsistent, being a really rough coin flip. However, in Kalgara, we can take an early Holly off of an upper yard search and play it from hand without sweating things. It's a similar philosophy with things like Wiper, Kalgara, and Enel. You have a strong ability to steer the direction of the game and can get to what options you need if you can see stage. So very general advice, search Enel more often on your going second curve. In some fast matchups, it's very hard to live that long, and survivability is more important if you're going first. If you can't get to 10 Dawn and have Enel in hand, you usually want to grab the 0-cost event. If you have stage and you're going first, you're going to want to make sure you have 5-cost Wiper. It converts into future plays absurdly well. Also, expect a 4-cost Wiper to whiff. He has the worst odds in the deck, so plan on it almost always mostly being a 2k counter. My deck makes use of the niche option Braham for dealing with this current meta. He bottom decks any 1-cost stage to rest an opponent's 4-cost or lower unit. This is a good going for game effect, generally, but it bottom decks either yours or the opponent's stage, letting you chunk full of lead against Blackbeard, going Mary versus Luffy, or even the niche Navy HQ, Germa Kingdom, or Karaita Coliseum. It's a surprisingly wide utility, and it still works with your own stage if need be, making it a highly situational but very worth it card to tech at 1 or 2. So let's talk about that survivability I've been mentioning. It's reasonable to expect that on our 7 to 8 Dawn turn, we will have to survive 7-ish attacks from green-purple Luffy at high numbers. The best way to do this is to trick them into playing board control, having 7+ cards in hand, or having 3 life. Obviously, over the course of a game, these are not likely to be something you can consistently do, so we're going to have a few gimmicks to cheat us there. First up is having multiple Nolans. Generally speaking, if you have a starting hand with 2 Nolans, it's always worth keeping. It's very easy to search Kalgara and impossible to search Noland. A lot of matchups can't remove 6-drop Kalgara on curve easily, so it's worth it to heal once immediately and then use Noland again to heal next turn. We can bank a life without actually losing value in hand. A minor thing worth noting about Kalgara's leader effect is it is not cost to add a life into hand. So if you are at 0 life, you can swing, play your Kalgara, not have to take a life, then play Noland and go back up to 1. This can matter in some very desperate situations. Second, while we don't have that many 1-cost defensive events because of an L, I do still run 2 The Earth Will Not Lose, specifically for surviving until our 10-drop NL turn. 7k is extremely common, so a +3 is obvious to go to, especially since our 7 to 9 Dawn curve isn't much better than our 5-6, letting us leave 1 Dawn up and ensure we can protect our board. You might have noticed that I'm running 3 copies of Kazuki Hiyori. Simply put, we needed a third 2k counter, and Hiyori has some funny utility. You can put a Satori into life for a free unit and a larger board. Now, the much more common choice is to use Hiyori to put a 0-cost event into bottom life to gain a cheeky extra life. Despite the smaller ratios of these cards, remember that the 0-cost event is searchable, so you can choose to go into this only when you already have the Hiyori in hand, and I mean, hell, you could even combo this with a Noland if your setup is right. Worst comes to worst, it is still a 2k counter, and that's the largest reason it's in the deck. Let's talk about some other options, and why you should and should not run them. First off, Rush Ace and NL. Rush Ace enables you to score cheeky rush attacks on a 7k base, and can immediately be helpful for poking in ways that's just not possible from 10-drop NL. However, in my playstyle, I find him a bit hard to work into curves, and I think he's just better in a build without 10-drop NL, who really supplements his role in the deck. I think you honestly could cut out Braham and find some room for him and see solid success. There's a lot of personal preference there. 7-drop Rush NL, however, is just flat out too expensive, and the 4-cost event is too difficult to really use, but I don't know, maybe if you were getting really goofy with it, you could make it work. Zeus and Gadatsu are 2 removal options for this deck. Gadatsu working as a tech similar to Brahim, and Zeus replacing Hiyori as a 2k option. Gadatsu works very well against decks with small below 3-cost bodies, like Zoro, Bonnie, and even Lucci. So it is a bit of a personal call. Zeus, however, is much more justifiable, having very, very strong spot removal. A 5-cost can give you a lot of wiggle room against most decks, especially if they mess up like Green Purple Luffy. However, I do find the life cost a bit too much in a deck that's already going so low regularly. But the calculation on what you'd gain from removing a body is there, so it depends. In my build, Hiyori is of course very gimmicky, and both options will be used as a 2k counter more often than not, so use your judgment. It's a bit iffy, at least until we get future support in OP12. For this deck's matchups, it's pretty solid for the most part. Of course, we do struggle into the best decks, because they simply have stronger options than us. But it's also not an immediate game over, since we're able to consistently pepper 6k swings and actually ramp up into late game. A good Luffy player will win more often than not, and out-navigate our options, especially if we don't see a good line, but if we set up for it, we do have a chance. Secondly, this deck does very well in the tempo decks, by being just fast enough to outpace them. Rob Lucci, Bonnie, and Shanks get pushed up against the wall right before they can convert in the spam top end. And even still, 10-drop NL gives an edge with these as well, enabling a stacking grind game late. The problem comes from us really losing to getting out aggroed. Those matchups require you to stabilize, and unfortunately, Kalgara tends to set up a turn too late and often won't make it to the 10-drop, especially going first. This is a legit thing the Anellis build is better on, but it comes at the cost of having worse tempo matchups. Kalgara in OP12 is getting 4 new cards worth of support. 2 new 2Ks, a Searcher event for Noland, and most importantly, a new 5-drop Kalgara. This 5-drop enables you to convert aggro into a draw. As a deck, Kalgara already tends to spiral into larger hands. This doubles that and prevents you from going low life. These new cards have seen some success in the East, and really strengthen up the Anellis build of the deck. So if you want to know how this deck evolves in future, expect it to shift more in that direction. Thank you to the Kalgara Discord under the Bigger One Piece Discord for helping me figure out and test a lot of these ideas. While I had found some of these texts on my own, some of them, like Katakuri Blocker, wouldn't have come without them finding it first. Deck building is best when it's collaborative, and I thank them for their work, and I do hope my take on the deck goes over well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.